Hi there, everyone. This is Joe Ribello, known to many in the martial arts world and the internet as Kenpo Joe. And in today's video, we're going over an important piece of the legacy of Professor Chow and a gentleman who learned from Professor Chow and incorporated elements of his training with Professor Chow into his particular system. I'm doing this on behalf of the International Kempo Council of Grand Masters, and I'm doing this as the video to explain about a particular form taught by Professor Cerio, which was to Pinion. Now, originally in the original system that Nick Cerio taught, he studied Kata Zempo Goshin Jutsu with George Pasari. Later on, he would train with such individuals as Ted Olson, James Benko, Tadashi Yamashita, Fumio Demura, Feng Chin. And one of the forms he had learned was he learned the Kata Zempo forms from George Pasari, and then learned some of the Tang Sudo forms, Taikyoku forms, basic HRI patterns. And then he went to go train with Professor Chow, with his friend Bill Massarelli from Fall River, Massachusetts. When he came back, he talked to his wife Nancy. He says, "What I'm going to do, it's completely different." So he decided to honor Professor, who honored him by being part of his organization and represented in New England as part of the United States, obviously. And he decided to take elements of the basics he had learned from Professor Chow and put them into the basic Taikyoku or H or I pattern. That became True Pinion. I'm going to demonstrate it and elaborate on different elements that he learned from Professor Chow and explain them to you. Let's begin, shall we? True Pinion. And there you have it, True Pinion. Let's explain some of the various strikes that are done throughout the course of this form. The first strike that he learned from Professor Chow was a vertical thrust punch to the groin. And again, prior to that, he hadn't learned any forms that did that. Again, a vertical alignment, punching to the groin. Again, for those of you who may have three combination, we have a punch to the groin. However, it's horizontal. This taught him vertical. The second element he learned was a very important feature that Ed Parker confirmed, and several other people worked with Professor Chow. I've worked with over half a dozen people trained directly with Professor Chow, and I've learned a lot of confirmation of the fact from Professor Chow. And this became a very important ingredient. Ed Parker has a phrase, where linear moves end, circular moves begin. And in this element, this is something that Professor Chow taught with the following, where, again, we go from a horizontal thrust with our front hand, or a front two knuckle, as taught in New England, into a rolling cross hammer fist to the groin. Now, there are four basic actions that we can work off. In Mr. Parker's striking set 1, we learn straight thrust, rolling back knuckle. Straight thrust, rolling back knuckle. Straight thrust, rolling hammer fist. Straight thrust, rolling hammer fist. Straight thrust, inverted vertical roundhouse. Straight thrust, inverted vertical roundhouse. Straight thrust, rolling hammer fist to the ribs. Straight thrust, rolling hammer fist to the ribs. Again, from the linear thrust with our front two knuckles in a horizontal plane. And by the way, later on in the set, you learn it vertically and then doing the various strikes off of it as well. Learning as opposed to the arm being fully extended in a horizontal plane, the elbow is anchored on the vertical plane. But getting back to the form, we learned that when I throw that punch, here's a very important feature. Later on, we do an upward block. This is a defense against an upward block. I throw a punch, they do an upward block, I strike them with a rolling fist. And if you watch the footage of Professor Cerio, you'll see he'll squat low. And he's a fairly short gentleman, but still squat low to strike that lower target of the groin. So that's what's happening. I throw a punch, you do an upward block, I roll into a hammer fist to the groin. Next, we learn about what some people call, in Japanese, call it the riken, or the back knuckle or uppercut. Now, some people just thrust the arm out. Others will utilize a snapping fashion and returning it back to its position. But in either case, the riken, or the 45-degree angle, again, for those of you who do the New England-based Kempo systems, and what I mean by that, meaning the systems that started with George Passari in Rhode Island to Nick Cerio, who was originally a mechanic from Boston into Rhode Island, and later progressing on through Fred Villari and promoting it through the original United Studios of Self-Defense, later to become Fred Villari Studios of Self-Defense. Charlie Matera would then take the name, went on the West Coast, and reactivate the United Studios of Self-Defense with the bonsai tree like the Karate Kid. But any of those lineages, Steve Damasco on down, Paul Taylor with The Ultimate, doesn't matter, anyone from that lineage. So, that 45, again and again, if we learn, like our first example combination, or combination 3, punch, grab, back to knuckle, right, or uppercut. The next strike that's learned after that is very important, and there's a very interesting aspect regarding it. The way Professor Cerio, I believe, learned it from Professor Chow, when he learned the technique and brought it back originally, something got lost in translation. It went back to a more traditional upward block. What do I mean by that? Well, so in the form, we go to our left, we go to our right, we come up. We turn, we go to our left, we go to our right, we come back. And at this point, my back's facing you, and I'm in the left tap moon stance. So I'm going to turn and face you in the left tap moon stance. So from this position, I step through upward. Now, originally, when he learned it from Chow, the upward block was done this way, with an uppercut action, and then blocking up. This is the way Ed Parker learned it from Chow. Uppercut, block. Spear hand to the groin, or vertical thrust to the groin, back to knuckle, or open spear to the throat. From this position, you then go from an open hand, if you learned it with a spear or closed fist, and you go upward block, like so. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, again, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. So when I pivot, turn to cat, the hand comes right up to my ear from there. But what happened with as time went on, people didn't have anything to cross-reference to. So because of that, what would occur, instead of coming up from the uppercut position, they in turn they chamber back and they do the original upcuts, retracting back and blocking up and striking. So that kind of got lost in translation, unfortunately, but it was part of Chow's basics, and that's why Professor did it, originally with closed fists and later on with spear hands. Did Nick Cerio or Fred Villari put that in? I don't know who. I don't know when it changed. The earliest footage I've seen of Professor has him with closed fists, not open hands. And when I learned it from the original United Studios of Self-Defense in 1973 in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, from Fred E. Hosmer, Ed Hosmer, I was taught it with spear hands. So, and the last portion we're talking about is called the corkscrew punch. And again, where circular moves end, linear moves begin. Now, again, you'll see some people just thrust it out. When I originally learned it, it was block, snap back to blocking position. Step through outward block, snapping back to blocking position. There you have it. The legacy behind two Pinion, the legacy which began with Professor Nick Cerio, who in turn learned this material along with Bill Massarelli from Professor Chow directly, and to show Professor Chow that he was incorporating elements of what he had learned in Hawaii, he decided to put these basics in this basic H or I pattern, the Taikyoku form, and dub it Pinion 2. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this history lesson, and I hope you got some insight out of it. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. Place questions or in the comments section if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this on TikTok or some other format, do it that way as well. I hope you got something out of today's instruction. Until next time, keep training.